Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Bearable Bull here. And man, oh man, do I have this powerful interview for you today. As I know that every single one of you knows that Hedera, Hbar, is one of my favorite cryptos on the planet and my second largest holding. I've been holding on to Hbar and have recommended it to this entire community since 1.8 cents. And today, I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing the Hbar Foundation CEO, Shayne Higdon. Please give him and the Hbar Foundation a follow on Twitter. Something I have to tell all of you is the amount of information that was exposed in this specific video will make all of you even more confident in the amount of utility and adoption that will be in store for Hbar, and it will reaffirm just how high quality this tech is. I learned plenty of things from Shayne in this specific interview, and I know all of you will learn a lot as well. Now, I don't typically do this when I post interviews. However, this is an urgent bull run warning message I have to my entire community. In my OnlyFans down in the description below, I have one of my favorite AI projects on the planet that is hyper suppressed down more than 97%. That's waiting to erupt, that I think is showing the signs of going absolutely parabolic. It's still at an excellent entry point, and I genuinely believe a FOMO opportunity to still get in is in store for all of us. And the only reason I'm telling you guys to check it out in an interview style video is because time is literally running out before this baby starts to rip. The link to my OnlyFans is down in the description below. And now, without further ado, prepare to get your minds absolutely blown away by Shayne from the Hbar Foundation, as you're all about to learn why I chose to marry Hedera and why this baby is one of the most undervalued long-term plays left in the crypto market. I think Hbar has a legitimate chance of entering the top 5 tokens on the planet. The sky truly is the limit. Now, without further ado, please enjoy this interview.
And we are live. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone from across the world. It is my absolute pleasure and honor for me to introduce to you Shayne from the Hbar Foundation for Everyone Today. Before we got started, you guys know me, but Shayne, if you would like to introduce yourself to everyone in the audience and at home, I'm sure they would really like to get to know you.
Bearable Bull, thanks, man, for having me on. I'm Shayne Higdon, the co-founder and CEO of the Hbar Foundation. We're the preeminent foundation focused on building the ecosystem in and around the Hedera community. We have largely focused over the last year on incentivizing builders, dreamers, and the like to build on top of this unique technology.
Excellent. And before we really get into the nitty gritty, I'm curious to know if you could just describe a little bit of your background, how you got to be at the Hbar Foundation and what your role really is over there.
Great. Yeah, certainly. So let me just tell you how I got involved in software in general. So late 90s, I started out as a developer in, I guess, what a lot of folks would say is Web 1. Doing a lot of internet development, at the time, just basic HTML. We didn't even have CSS or cascading style sheets, or, there was still JavaScript, but there wasn't much else. And so started out there, then grew my career in the enterprise, largely still focused on web-based technologies. And most recently, prior to this, was president of one of the divisions of an enterprise software company called BMC Software, which was acquired by KKR. Prior to that, they had gone private in a transaction with Bain and Golden Gate Capital, and was an advisor at another unicorn startup called HiRadius, focused on order to cash. And how I got started here was, I took some time off and I was really trying to determine this whole idea around Web 3. My career started in Web 1, grew up, if you will, in Web 2, and what is this stuff called Web3, and really wanted to focus not on speculating of a given token or the price of a token, but really focused on where are real world use cases getting built and on what chains are they getting built. And one of the chains I ran across Hedera. Interestingly enough, I had worked with a gentleman who was the CMO at Hedera at the time, Christian Hasker. I'd worked with him at another company some 15 years earlier. And so I reached out to him and just connected and said, hey, can you tell me more? And 3 months later, we had, really talked about creating a foundation and really accelerating the ecosystem. And so myself and another gentleman decided to do that, and I haven't looked back.
That's very interesting because it's that small world connections to people that you have met in the past that really propel and get you places that you don't even expect to get to. So that's interesting to hear how that happened.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that is absolutely, I think, paramount when you think about your career. I mean, you can always get a job, from your experience or your resume, but it is always easier if you know someone who's been involved in something and can help
Mhm.
open a door or answer questions that may not be, publicly available. And all of those things happen for me in having a conversation with Christian.
Excellent, excellent. And I guess what I'll ask too is I know that Christian probably had a big role in you choosing Hbar, but how did you go about your process, and maybe what other chains were on your radar to potentially look into too? And what made Hbar stand out to you?
Yeah, great question. So, I certainly looked at the likes of, Solana and Chainlink and Algorand and others,
Mhm.
Polygon being a side chain of Ethereum. What really intrigued me, and the first place I went was I said, can I talk to the product guys? And so I was immediately connected with Dr. Lehman Baird,
Mhm.
who is, he's just a wizard and, just a fun person to talk to. And so he really educated me on the background and why he chose to build what he built. I also talked to another guy who's now head of product. He was head of product at Hedera before they separated into and further decentralized into Swirls Labs. A gentleman by the name of Lionel Chacron,
Mhm.
who's a wealth of knowledge and really driving the HIP process, who I talked to ad nauseum around the product and what was unique and what were some of the gaps. At the time that I joined and really focused on the foundation, we didn't have things like EVM compatibility at the time. We didn't have an RPC relay. We didn't have some of the wallets we had today, and all of those things in concert with and support from them, along with the HBAR Foundation. We've been able to expand that, what I'll call infrastructure and ecosystem, to get where we are today. So I think when I did my research, it was really focusing on that project, that product basis. We talked a lot about use cases because to me, if you don't have use cases, and when I say use cases, I'm thinking about what problem is
Yeah.
a given project trying to solve? How big is that problem? Is that problem ubiquitous? Is the solution that's been developed by the project really, really unique? And is it in some way, is there a moat around it, right? Is it protectable IP, or can someone else do the same thing? And
Mhm.
then the third area is ability to execute from a management team. Oftentimes I want to look for teams that have actually had failures, and what they learned from those failures, because it's then that those teams can oftentimes look around the corners, and understand what's coming. So to me, it was that use case, that problem, and it's were they new problems being solved in new ways through Web3, or were they old problems being solved, with this new technology? I think it spans the gamut, and I think we're seeing some of those things go live on the network today.
Excellent. And just hold everything for 1 second. I have a question to ask you first, but I do want to get to that IP point that you made very quickly
Sure,
afterwards.
sure.
So before I get into that, what I'll ask is what exactly is the HBAR Foundation and its role in building out the entire ecosystem?
So the Hbar Foundation, when we created it, we were really focused on three big goals. One was to grow the awareness of what we call the Hbar economy. The second was to accelerate access to the Hbar economy. And the third was to increase commerce in the Hbar economy. And so as we thought about our grant giving activities, which is the primary role of the foundation, we give grants to incentivize developers, projects, teams to build on top of our network and to, ultimately change the world. And so that is the primary role that we have. And many of the projects satisfy all three of those goals. Some satisfy one or two of them. But that's what we are primarily focused on.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And just briefly, can you give us a little bit of an overview of what the Hedera Governing Council is and its role in developing the Hbar ecosystem as well? Because a lot of people, they may not necessarily know the structure and the power behind what that is.
Sure. So when you think about the Governing Council, today, it is a group of 28 companies. There are 39 positions on the Governing Council, and they are focused on governing the network, which includes the Treasury, so all of the Hbar that was minted. It includes the roadmap of the network, so they help inform, the HIP process. And as there are subcommittees that I'll talk about in a second related to the Governing Council, and it further decentralizes. So each of the Governing Council members have to run a node of the network. We have since put an additional, we being the foundation plus Hedera plus Worlds Labs, have put an additional focus where we want the majority of the Governing Council members building use cases on top of the network. And I think, that today is in the upward 90+% that are actually building on the network. I think part of the frustration by the community is, what are those use cases, right? And these are big multinational enterprises that still consider, much of this under NDA. But we try to share what we can share, what we're approved to share, as often as we can. And we've got some council members that, and we can talk about this later in the interview. We've got some council members that have gone public with some of the things that they are building. But the idea behind this came from a book written by a gentleman named D. Hock. And the book is called One from Many, Visa and the Rise of the Chaotic Organization. This book really chronicles the way Visa was built. Visa was built in the same way, the Visa network, which does roughly 70,000 transactions per second. All of that really, in the way that they developed it, was very similar. They had various node operators that built for lack of a better term, a governing council that ultimately is today what is the Visa network and continues to expand. And so I think it's critical. While, I think there is within the community this belief that we are still very centralized, I think that this is, it's not true. For a lot of reasons. And I think as we go into the first half of this year, when we roll out community nodes, in addition to, the 28 council members today, going up to 39, it's incredibly decentralized. And then finally, with August 5th of 2022, the consensus algorithm was fully open source, even though it was patented. And so I think that, and I don't think a lot of people know that still today, it's particularly a lot of developers. So I think when you ask folks that knew Hedera, say 2 years ago, they're like, it's centralized and it's closed source. Well, all of that is not true as a result. And so you can go out to GitHub, you can look at the repos we've got, et cetera. Our developer community is growing exponentially, 80+%, this last year, and we continue to want to expand it. So the Governing Council plays a critical role in helping with the awareness, but also some of the massive use cases that are going to be built and have been built on the network, one of which, just went live over the last month.
Now, there's a lot to unpack from that, and I'm going to get to quite a couple points in just a second. But for those of you at home that may not know some of the members of the governing council for Hedera, there's Boeing, DBS, Google, IBM. I could go down the list, but people might get a little too excited, right?
That's right.
But part of what I wanted to touch on is that centralized versus decentralized point. And I feel like there's this false paradigm and this idealism of pure decentralization because of Satoshi's vision, right? Bitcoin was really decentralized, and he just put it out and let the system run on its own. Me, as an individual looking at the world objectively today, I think that's borderline impossible to replicate, and also not necessarily the most conducive to make great businesses, use cases, and products in the real world, right? So I feel like there's this dilemma with the inception of creating a new project and a new token and what it turns out to be, right? So I think that it's important that we have the right people building, and then the right companies, institutions, developers developing it to continue to further the growth, right? And then as things continue to build, the true decentralization really comes into play, right? Is that kind of what is that kind of the approach that Hbar took? Because it seems like that's what's
Yeah, it's a great, it's a really good question. I think if you think about and compare and contrast it to Bitcoin, and specifically the underlying technology of blockchain, Bitcoin is the use case on top of blockchain, right? It was trying to solve a problem around double spending in the digital world, right? And, there were digital currencies, going back to the 80s that, but they could never solve this idea that your digital dollar and my digital dollar were not the same if we tried to buy the same good or service. And so I think that in and of itself was the use case, and it just so happened to get organically adopted. And the mining idea and the difficulty and all of that really kind of created this idea that says, hey, look, I can make money, right? If I buy a bunch of computers and buy a bunch of compute, and I start really trying to solve this puzzle. I think a lot of folks, though, took and said, wait a second, this idea of immutability and potentially decentralization is a key concept. How can we explore this, and how can this be applied to other industries and other problems that occurred? And this is when you had the rise of DeFi and so many other things that are still, being baked out. I mean, I still think we're 20 plus years away. I mean, look at where we are today, just in the internet era, from where we were in the late 90s, right? You had dial up, you had 2800 baud modem still. We didn't have, we didn't have this instant access. We certainly didn't have, phones in our hand with, a rich set of data at our fingertips, whether that be Google, whether that be, Wikipedia, or now the next version, Chat GPT. We just didn't have that. And so this entire space is going to evolve, and it's going to, continue to quickly evolve, in whether it's Moore's law or, some other way that it evolves, but it's going to continue to evolve. And, the reason I wanted to do this was because you get to, if you're a part of something like Hedera, where you believe you're a part of best of breed technology, unique as it is, and you're a part of it, you can see from the inside out, versus being simply a consumer, where imagine your parents who haven't been involved in this, that now have iPhones, and they call you and say, hey, I'm trying to do this. Can you help me? Right. Yeah. That's the outside in. They didn't see the evolution happen. They just now have a phone in their hand that has more power than, the original computer that sent the man to the moon. And so to me, that's the ultimate of where we are. And I think anybody that's working for any chain, I think, is lucky to see this inside out view of how this market is evolving. And I think it's going to be the chains that are focused on user experience and making that as seamless and as easy as possible to real use cases. I think that those are the things that are going to win. And I say the user experience because even today, while over the last 3 years, 4 years, it's certainly advanced to still be involved in crypto digital assets. It's still fairly technical.
Hmm.
Imagine transferring, you know, imagine doing a swap. Imagine using a bridge. Imagine wrapping, ETH to something else. I mean, I mean, imagine trying to tell your mom and dad that, right? Who aren't technologists, right? We're
Yeah.
still not to the place where you're going to get mass adoption in given verticals because there's still some clunkiness to the user experience.
Mhm. And I'm glad that you brought that up because it just goes to show how we're still in the infancy of this market, and
Correct.
we haven't even gotten out the starting block, in my personal opinion. So it's encouraging to hear that. And for those of you at home that may have gotten dissuaded because prices went down a little bit, please don't be. The technology now is much more built out than it was a year and a half ago when prices were better, right? So I'm even more confident now in all of these things than I was back then when prices were higher. So that's a great point. And to kind of segue into something that we touched on earlier about the intellectual property, and you mentioned that Hashgraph is patented. That's very important, but also that it's now open source, right? That seems a little counterintuitive. Um, I kind of want to get into the thought process behind one, patenting the technology, and two, why is it now open source and why is that important?
So I'm probably not the number one expert that can talk about that. That would certainly be,
Sure.
Mance or Lehman. But
Hmm.
I will give you my perspective and that which I believe I know.
Hmm.
The reason it was ultimately patented was, like any IP, you patent it to protect it.
Yes.
And I think they wanted to limit an ability to fork the
Mm.
code for obvious reasons. And so if you patent it, then you have, some sort of legal recourse should someone fork it. Think about the number of forks on Ethereum, whether it's Ethereum Classic to what we know as Ethereum today. Think about other chains that have been forked,
Yes.
duplicate assets on chains, et cetera, and the complexity. And so, but what that did is I think it inhibited organic growth of a developer community early on. And open sourcing it on August 5th, there was a belief, given the number of council members, given the amount of Hbar in the market, it would be incredibly difficult to be a bad actor, to take over the network and ultimately fork it. And so I believe there was a general belief and consensus, no pun intended, by the folks that are running it to say, hey, now's the time for us to fully open source it. Let people use it as they see fit. And so, if another chain wants to use the, Hedera consensus service, let them do that, right? They don't have to use all of the other services on top of it, the smart contract service, the token service. They can just call the, HCS, as we call it, HCS, the Hedera consensus service to do that. And so, and developers can integrate that now. They can go out to GitHub just like they would any other open source project and be able to pull that down. And so I think that one was, an inability to fork, and then now open sourcing it to cast a wide net into the developer community to
Mm.
really say, hey, it's available like, any other chain that is fully open source to do so. And so I think that's where we've also seen, the growth of the NFT marketplaces, on, just the developer activity, NFT marketplaces, and the growth of the developer ecosystem in and around Hedera.
Excellent. And that's really great to hear because it seems to me, as far as I can tell, that this was really thought out. They really thought to protect the technology and not have, kind of the bit of the mess that we have with ecosystems like Bitcoin and Satoshi's Vision and Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum Classic and all these different things. It can get messy. So I like that. It seems that they've thought of future potential problems and really did their best to resist all that, in my opinion. So
Yeah,
it's,
and I think that they certainly did, and I think that has had some other effects, which is the effect of not having the same level of awareness or capturing our share of voice in the market
mhm,
alongside some of the other chains because of that, and which is also why though we've been able to build during this bear market and do some really unique things and from a TPS perspective, really become the number one chain out there with
mhm.
so much more to be done. So excited about where we are.
Excellent. Now, Shayne, this is where we're going to take a turn into a little story I have about me and my relationship with Hedera. I
Okay.
don't know if you know this. I'm married to Hedera. I love Hedera. It is one of my biggest holdings and one of my favorite projects. I'm looking to really hold it as much as I can for as long as possible. That is my strategy with it because I believe in it so much. However, many people have been frustrated by the recent bear market. But what I tell people is that bear markets are where the true building happens, right? Just like you
Mhm.
mentioned. What are some of the things that have been built out and developed over the past year and a half that really has you excited about the future of this ecosystem?
Great question. We, over the course of the last year, we as a foundation, we have delivered over 200 grants, totaling over $360 million.
Mhm,
I think if you saw our end of year blog, we've got uh, most likely 80 different projects going live on the network in Q1.
mhm,
And so we have been, and if you think about the foundation, and I'll give a bit of a commercial here just so that you understand how we're structured. When we started the foundation, we had and a lump of capital that tokens that Hedera had given us,
mhm,
and we wanted to organize that in and aligned to markets that we wanted to serve. The first was the crypto economy market, right? Creating and building the crypto infrastructure we needed. This is where we got our first dexes on board: Saucer Swap, Hella Swap, Bubble Swap. In
mhm,
fact, just on Monday, Pangolin just went live on Hedera,
mhm,
plus the Coinbase listing and so many other listings that we've gotten to extend Hbar to so many different audiences. The second was the Metaverse Fund that was originally called the Loyalty and Customer Engagement Fund. We ultimately made that the Metaverse Fund, but focusing on brands engaging with users. And that's where things like sports and gaming and ticketing and other things reside. The third area is a Sustainable Impact Fund. This is where not only are we carbon negative, but
mhm,
we are investing in from a grant perspective in investing our time and resources in projects that are looking to make the world a better place. And then
mhm,
the third is payments and fintech. And this is where even though tokenization is a part, whether it's NFTs, or tokenizing real estate assets, payments and fintech is an area of real focus for us. So those are the four kind of fund areas that we have been investing in and giving grants to projects to do that. So as I think about things that are pretty fun, one is one of our council members, Avery Dennison, large company that they had spun out and created another technology called Atma.io, ATMA.io. It was demoed at Davos this last week, but they are taking and it's called the Connected Product Cloud is what they're doing, and they're taking all of these items that many of the relationships that they've got with some of the biggest vendors in the world, and from raw material to retail sale, they're chronicling how much carbon footprint that part of the process took, and then they're allowing that vendor to go buy carbon offsets so that they can be carbon neutral. And there's billions of items being chronicled, and so you saw as that went live, plus a couple of other use cases, you saw that just TPS on the network explode. We were excited to see that. I think the community was excited to see that. And,
mhm,
if you look at things like realtps.net, we're the number one chain by, looking at, TPS. And unlike some of the other chains, these aren't voting or gossip messages. These are true consensus messages that are coming to finality. So it's exciting to see that kind of throughput. And I know many of the community knows that that's, just the beginning. We've got some coming in gaming that are really exciting. And, if you're a gamer, you look at this idea around NFTs in a game, and maybe you frown on it. We're interested in what Lithos is going to bring to the network. These are, the background is folks from, Sony PlayStation, and games like The Last of Us, and Uncharted, that are really trying to see in a Web3 world, can they do something unique? So just this last Sunday, they released their first digital comic book. They've partnered with Just Mako, who has 53 million followers on TikTok, and they're doing, call it a short form film, five or six episodes on TikTok, chronicling Ashes. The game is called Ashfall, chronicling the story behind Ash. And so it's just really creative and unique. And this is going to create, millions of accounts on the network, not to mention a number of transactions. And so I'm really watching and waiting with bated breath to see this continue to take off. But it's that kind of use case, that kind of thoughtful, smart team that says, hey, look, we're going to try to take, gaming and AAA gaming, but we're going to try to bring it into this new world of Web3. And they're trying a lot of new things. And so that's exciting. We've seen, as I said, more DEXs go live on the network. And, that's exciting because, I think in this world, as people are trying to invent the future of finance, how does that look? How does that happen, whether it is CBDCs or whether it is tokenization? Let me give you an example of one that I'm excited about. A new council member, Aberdeen. They've got $508 billion of assets under management. They are, and this is a stated goal. So this is, one of the reasons why I can talk about this, though they're a large company, is because they've stated this publicly. They are tokenizing their money market funds on Hedera, and then they're going to be tokenizing their other funds, their real estate fund and others. To me, that's exciting. It's gonna make settlement faster. It's going to make it easier for them to transact and do business. And then we have, down in Australia, FPOS, the preeminent, debit card provider, along with ANZ Bank. The stuff that they're building here, and I think the consortium now is called AP Plus. So just so much is happening from both a Web3 DGen application DAT perspective and an enterprise perspective. And for us, what we really want to be is we want to be the best of both worlds and really try to appeal to that new developer wanting to develop something, think they have a great idea and a great technology, while at the same time appealing to the enterprise that says, you know what, I'm trying to digitally transform. I'm trying to take my old business and I'm trying to put it and use some of this newer technology. And the last example I'll give is ServiceNow, who is just been a juggernaut of a company since they IPO'd way back when. Fred Luddy was the original founder of ServiceNow, and they've gone through many iterations, and they continue to grow like crazy. In fact, I think their last quarter they grew like something like 27%. And this is a company, with tens of billions of dollars of revenue and a market cap in the hundreds of billions. And so for them to be building, and they've got a platform, their now platform, Hedera, the Hedera platform, Hashgraph, sits alongside the Now platform. They've got some 30 odd use cases that they're considering building, and one of which is they have taken and automated a chargeback mechanism. So if you're in IT, as an example, and in IT, you've got you're supporting the business, right? You're running the systems and applications that support the business. You oftentimes, as a business leader, you get an allocation of IT resources. So, it's going to allocate some percentage to you. And let's say you use more than that percentage. Today, the process of charging back and said, hey, from IT, you've used more than what you were allocated. We need to charge you more. That process has been manual. What they're doing here is they're putting all of that on chain so that it becomes automated. It becomes immutable. It's hard to argue with that. And then not to mention, they're leading from the front with some of the ESG marketplace stuff that they're doing, and tokenization with one of our other projects on the network called Toko, which is a tokenization platform. So I could sit and rattle off and talk about real world projects for an hour. And, I just, and some of the newer projects, it's just exciting to watch and see this evolve. And, I'm learning the art of the possible as fast as, I think the community is at times.
Excellent. And I know you just went through a lot, and that's very powerful to hear. I learned a lot from just listening to you, but to kind of reflect and talk it back for people in the audience, there are a couple extremely important points that I want to hammer home. The transactions per second, the throughput that Hedera is capable of really executing on, that's powerful, because we are in an attention economy where people's attention spans are absolutely minuscule, 3 to 5 seconds, because of what has happened with TikTok and that phenomenon. And I don't think people really want to sit there and pay expensive gas fees and wait an hour for transactions to settle anymore, right? So that's extremely powerful. Something else is the carbon negative aspect as well, and saying that you have projects building out and looking to comply with upcoming ESG regulations, right? That's been a point of contention in politics nowadays. Some people like it, some people don't like ESG. Regardless of whether you like it or not, the climate change narrative and this agenda at play is definitely coming, right? And the fact that Hedera, Hbar, and partners are building and looking to really be front runners of this new era is really telling as to where things are really going to be. So that's very important, and I want people to really get that. They're thinking to be future proof. If I'm saying that correctly, right? So
yep. Yeah,
so
I think you said well said.
Thank you. But something that I do want to add is, because of everything that you just said that is being built out, the number of partners, the number of use cases, that comes with the fat tab, believe it or not. Some people at home may not know this, but developing a new ecosystems is expensive. And there has been one critique that constantly comes up when it comes to Hbar and the Hbar Foundation, and that is the increase in the supply of Hbar onto the market, because that has caused the price to go lower than maybe a lot of people may have wanted. So what I'll ask you is to kind of explain the reason for why the supply increase was had, and really what those funds and that Hbar gets used for.
Great question. I think that, from the supply perspective, I'm not in a position, because I don't approve of, when the supply gets increased. That's a governing council decision by Hedera. And so for clarity, we, as the Hbar Foundation, received 5.35 billion Hbar starting in November of 2021. And so there was a number of Hbar, specifically 10.7 billion Hbar. I believe it was in September of 21 when the foundation was announced, either shortly before or after, for ecosystem development. And this was outlined by Hedera as a part of their plan. We received 5.35 billion of the 10.7 billion allocated for ecosystem development. So when folks believe that all of a sudden there was this release of all these Hbar out into the market, that was just simply not the case, number one. Number two, the 5.35 billion that we had we're holding it in our own treasury.
Mhm.
Certainly, we're giving grants, but we haven't paid out all of those grants. A portion of our granting has milestones associated to it. We see, while our primary role is certainly to incentivize developers and entrepreneurs, et cetera, to build on top of us, we do see our primary role as good capital allocators, right?
Mm.
And so what does that mean? We're not just going and giving somebody $100,000 grant and just saying go, right? And oh, by the way, that's unlocked. Every
Mhm.
grant that we have has some sort of performance or market driven relationship to it, because we want to make sure that we're not putting good money after bad. And so some of this color commentary, I think, is likely important
Mhm.
so that people don't think that Hedera and or the Hbar Foundation have just thrown caution to the wind, and now all of a sudden you've got all of this out into the market. While it adds to what the calculation of circulating supply, not all of that supply is truly in circulation with projects, if you will. Yes, if 5.35 billion is circulating to us, and then we're trying to determine how to be good capital allocators, but that's not all happening, at once. And so, hopefully that helps provide some level of context to how this is getting deployed. If you look at the aggregate number and you just go, oh my goodness, circulating supply is whatever the number is today, 30 plus billion. All of that is now in circulation. That's simply not the case.
Excellent. And that's really the point I wanted to hammer home. It's that they're responsible stewards of the supply of HBAR. I can't just go to you and ask for $1 million, right? I
Right.
don't think
No,
some
you could
I
well,
wish
you could ask, but we're likely not to give it to you, and we're
exactly.
certainly not going to give it to you unless there are either market-based performance factors or delivery
Exactly.
milestones associated to it.
Exactly. And part of what you added as well is that while the supply may be calculated as being on the open market, right, as part of the coin metrics, that does not mean it's just being flooded onto the market and sold and things like that. It's being used strategically to build out the ecosystem. I think what you just said is really
Well,
going to build
it
some.
is, and I think let me say this, Bearable, because look, I'm on Twitter and I see a lot of the comments as well, though I don't comment on them individually. This
Mhm.
idea that the retail investors have funded, everything is simply not true. While I'm not saying that they haven't, certainly, if they're deciding to buy the token and help us secure the network, that's great. But at the end of the day, just to give you an idea, give you a number to hold on to, which I think should be a positive number. 93% of the grants that we've given, the dollar amounts that we've given, have milestones associated to it. And so they have to achieve milestones 1, 2, 3. Some have 10 milestones before they can get the full amount. This helps us be good capital allocators, and it gives us the opportunity to make sure, because listen, things change, right? It's software. People get delayed for whatever reason. They run into an issue and it takes longer to get where they need to get. And it allows us to have a conversation with the grantee and to figure out how can we help them, you know, get through the barrier, get over the hump, achieve what it is that they want to achieve, and have those regular conversations, as opposed to giving them, a significant amount of unlocked HBAR and just say go.
Yeah.
And so we take that very seriously, and I think our projects appreciate that, because many of them are, they don't necessarily know what they don't know, and we just want to be good partners with all of them. And we know we have multiple constituents, the projects, the community members who are doing great work, and those that are HBAR holders, and we just want to do what's right by all of them, while building, this ecosystem and the network effects that we hope to create.
Excellent, excellent. And just a quick side question. If someone were to maybe have a proposal or want to maybe get a grant to help build on Hedera, how would they go about that process?
They can go to hbarfoundation.org/apply. We have updated the grant application. That then goes into a process where we have a fairly detailed process. You'll be, reached out to by one of our business development reps to explore, what it is that you're trying to build. We then have a grant application. Then we have this pretty extensive grant process, making sure that we truly understand what it is that you're building, the market opportunity size, et cetera. We then have a grant committee that then approves that. So it's not the easiest of processes, but again, hopefully the community appreciates the level of diligence, both technical and business diligence that we do, because we just want to be a high integrity network.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. And this is part of decentralization, right? It has to
Yes.
start somewhere, and in order for things to really get built out properly, there needs to be some responsibility taken. So I love it. Absolutely love it. I think what I'm gonna ask is, and blink once if you can answer, and blink twice if you can't. I'm kidding, I'm kidding. But what are some things coming under development, coming down the road that you're truly excited for, that you can talk about, that aren't under NDAs and things like that?
There's nothing that comes off the top of my head. I know that, the Hbar Bull and Zepsi, also known as Rufus, they do a fairly regular update. And I think they do a really good job at highlighting some of the things that are interesting from the network. Most of what, I'm intimately familiar with is certainly under NDA. I've also certainly gotten in trouble with, hey, this is coming soon. So I acknowledge my errors in getting people spun up on things that are supposed to come soon, and we run into a snag. So while I'd love to do the same thing, I'm cautiously optimistic here and not going to do that, and just point you to other great content, particularly by those two, that I think highlight a bunch of stuff that is happening. Just a blanket statement. I am excited about all of the types of tokenization that is starting to occur. And I'll leave it there. That to me is it's exciting, and rethinking the way people use NFTs in real world scenarios, and I don't mean the JPEG type NFTs, but I'm talking about certifications. There's so many ways, and that's what I think is the most exciting to me. We have several use cases being built right now on the network, around financial instruments, around unique use things that you wouldn't even consider, around identity. So that is, I'm just sitting from the sidelines, many like you are, just a little bit more in the know, and just amazed at some of the ingenuity and innovation happening.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I guess we can wrap this up for the day. If you have any final thoughts, maybe a message you would like to relay to the community, and we could go to town.
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, again, thank you, Bearable Bull, for having me on. I love your questions, and thank you for your loyalty, your following. Yeah, it's just the work that you do. I know it's not easy, but it's fantastic, and happy to support that. I just want to say thanks to the community. I mean, this is such a positive community, not just the NFT community on us, but just so much happening right now. And I just want the community to know that despite the bear market, we have been working really hard, along with Squirrels Labs and Hedera, to really, really make sure that we're putting more wood behind the arrow of developing new services, new dApps, and incentivizing them to continue to build. It's in these down markets that greatness is made, and some of the greatest companies in the world emerged out of various crises, whether it was the 2007 2008 financial crisis, and you can make a list of companies that were founded in that era. We're believing that several of the projects that we've given grants to and have worked with are going to emerge in this bear market and help make Hedera the chain that we believe it should set out to be. So I just want to say thanks to all of those builders, entrepreneurs, dreamers that are building. Thanks to the community members who continue to support us. We can't do it alone. I think they know that. And I just want to say I'm personally grateful. And I know my team is. So thank you.
Hey, thank you. And for everyone at home, now you really understand why I'm married to Hedera. Now you guys know, right? So much love for everyone at home listening. I hope this really answered some questions. And if you guys have any more, reach out to me and I'll do my best to answer them. So, hey, Shayne, thank you so much. Send my love to the Hbar Foundation and community. And if there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you so much.
You know it. It's a pleasure. Thank you.